It arrives in a standard white envelope. It looks like a bank statement or a promotional offer for a new credit card. You almost throw it in the recycling bin without opening it. But you don't. You tear the strip off the top, unfold the letter, and you read the first line. And in that moment, your stomach drops. The blood runs cold in your veins. It is not a promotional offer. It is not a standard renewal notice. It is a demand. A demand for $100,000 in cash, payable within 30 days. If you cannot pay, the bank will not renew your mortgage. If you cannot pay, they will initiate the power of sale process. If you cannot pay, you lose your home. Welcome back to Canada Property Watch. We have warned you about the interest rate shock. We have warned you about the inventory tsunami. But today, when we are discussing the most terrifying phase of the housing crash, we are talking about the margin call. For decades, Canadians believed that as long as they paid their mortgage on time, the bank would leave them alone. That is a lie. We are entering a new era where paying on time is not enough. We are entering the era of appraisal shock. In this deep dive investigation, we are going to expose the silent crisis that is sweeping through the mortgage industry. We are going to explain why 300,000 homeowners are receiving these letters this year. We will break down the brutal math of loan-to-value ratios that are forcing banks to call in loans. We will look at the collapse of the private lending sector, the shadow banks, who are leading this charge. And we will tell you what being underwater really means for your financial future. To understand why this is happening, you have to understand the difference between a mortgage and a margin loan. In the stock market, if you borrow money to buy stocks and those stocks drop in value, the broker calls you and says, "Put more cash in the account or we sell your stocks." That is a margin call. For the last 20 years, Canadian real estate only went up, so nobody thought of a mortgage as a margin loan. But it is. It is a loan secured against an asset, and when that asset loses 30% of its value, the security is gone. The bank is naked, and banks do not like to be naked. Let's look at the math of the disaster. Let's take a typical borrower. Let's call him Mike. Mike bought a townhouse in the suburbs of Toronto or Vancouver in February 2022, the peak of the madness. He paid $1.2 million. He put 20% down, $240,000. He took out a mortgage for $960,000. Fast forward to 2026. Mike's mortgage is up for renewal. He walks into the bank expecting a higher interest rate. He is prepared for the payment shock. He has cut his budget. He is ready to pay 6% instead of 2%. But the bank officer doesn't look at his income. The bank officer looks at the computer screen and says, "I'm sorry, Mike, we need to order an appraisal." Mike thinks this is a formality. An appraiser comes to the house. He looks at the recent sales on the street, and he sees that the neighbor's house, the exact same model, just sold in a panic sale for $850,000. The appraiser sends the report to the bank. The house is now worth $850,000. But Mike still owes $900,000 on his mortgage because he has been on a variable rate with static payments, barely paying off any principal. The bank looks at the numbers. The loan is $900,000. The asset is $850,000. The loan-to-value ratio is over 100%. Mike is underwater. He has negative equity. The bank officer looks at Mike and says, "We cannot renew this mortgage. Under OSFI regulations and our internal risk management policies, we cannot hold an uninsured mortgage that is worth more than the house. That you need to bring the loan-to-value ratio down to 80%. Mike does the math. To get the loan down to 80% of the new value, $680,000, he needs to pay down the difference. He needs to pay the gap between $900,000 and $680,000. That is $220,000. "I don't have $220,000, Mike says. "I have $5,000 in my savings account." The bank officer shrugs. "Then we cannot renew. You have 30 days to pay the balance in full, or we will take the house." This is the letter. This is the margin call on the Canadian middle class. It is not happening to everyone yet, but it is happening to the most vulnerable, the 2020 to 2022 buyers who bought at the peak with maximum leverage. And it is happening first in the shadow banking sector. We have talked about the private lenders, the mortgage investment corporations, MICs. These are not benevolent institutions. They are sharks. They lent money to people who couldn't qualify at the big banks. They lent based on equity, not income. They said, "We don't care if you have a job as long as the house is worth more than the loan." Well, now the house is worth less than the loan. The private lenders are panicking. Their investors want their money back. They are issuing non-renewal notices by the thousands. They are not asking for a paydown. They are saying, "Get out. We want our money back. Go to a big bank." But these borrowers can't go to a big bank. If a private lender won't touch you, TD and Royal Bank certainly won't. Almost these borrowers are mortgage orphans. They have no home for their debt. They are forced into the power of sale pipeline. This is why we are seeing a spike in forced listings. These aren't people who want to sell. These are people who have been told to sell by a lender who is liquidating the portfolio. But the contagion is spreading to the big banks, the big six. For a long time, we thought the big banks would extend and pretend. We thought they would just let people amortize the loan over 90 years to avoid a crash. And they did that for a while. But there is a limit. That limit is regulatory scrutiny. The Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, OSFI, is watching. They are telling the banks, "You are holding too much bad debt. You need to clean up your balance sheets." This pressure forces the banks to get tough. They are starting to look at the loan-to-value ratios of their uninsured portfolio. If you put 20% down, you are uninsured. If your equity has been wiped out by the price crash, you are now a high-risk borrower. The bank doesn't want your house. They really don't. Foreclosure is expensive. It looks bad PR, but they also cannot hold an unsecured asset. So they offer you solutions that are actually traps. They might say, "Okay, we won't make you pay the full $200,000, but we need you to sign a new mortgage at 8% interest, and we need you to get a co-signer with substantial assets." They are trying to rope in your parents. They are trying to rope in your assets. And they are trying to secure their position before the ship goes down. Do not sign these papers without a lawyer. You are effectively pledging the rest of your life to pay for an asset that is already lost. Let's talk about the psychological prison of being underwater. When you have negative equity, you are trapped. You cannot sell the house to move for a job, because if you sell, you have to bring a check to the closing table. Imagine selling your house and paying the bank $50,000 for the privilege of leaving. Most people don't have the cash to sell, so they stay. They become zombie homeowners. They live in the house, they pay the mortgage, but they are technically insolvent. They are pouring money into a black hole. Every monthly payment is just covering interest on a debt that exceeds the value of the home. It is financial servitude. This creates a labor mobility crisis. An economy needs workers to move to where the jobs are. If there are jobs in Alberta, people should move to Alberta, but they can't. They are chained to their underwater mortgages in Ontario. This drags down the productivity of the entire nation. It creates a stagnant, frozen society, and the stress destroys families. When you are underwater, every conversation turns to money. Every expense is a fight. The divorce rate in households with negative equity skyrockets. And guess what happens in a divorce? The house has to be sold. And since there is no equity, the sale results in a bankruptcy for both parties. It is a tragedy in slow motion. Now, we must address the pre-construction nightmare. This is where the appraisal shock is most violent. 3 years ago, when people bought pre-con condos on paper for $900,000, they put down their deposit. Now the building is finished. It is time to close. The bank sends the appraiser. The appraiser says the condo is worth $700,000. The bank says, "We will only lend you 80% of $700,000. That is $560,000. The buyer still owes the builder the balance of the $900,000. There is a gap of $340,000. The buyer needs to come up with $340,000 in cash to close the deal. They don't have it. Nobody has it. So they try to walk away. They say, "Keep my deposit. I'm out." But the builder says, "No, you signed a contract. You are closing." The builder sues the buyer for the difference. Well, we are seeing thousands of lawsuits filing into the courts right now. Builders suing buyers, buyers suing realtors, everyone suing everyone because the money is gone. This is the definition of a systemic collapse. The money that was supposed to settle these transactions has evaporated into thin air, destroyed by the valuation crash. The Brampton loan is also coming home to roost. For years, Mortgage fraud was an open secret in Canada. People paid brokers to create fake T4 slips, fake employment letters, fake income histories to qualify for mortgages they couldn't afford. The banks turned a blind eye because house prices were going up. As long as the asset is appreciating, the fraud doesn't matter. But when the tide goes out, you see who is swimming naked. Now that the banks are auditing their portfolios for risk, and they are finding these fraudulent loans. And when they find one, it is an immediate recall. They don't offer renewal. They demand repayment in full immediately due to breach of contract. This is happening to thousands of families who thought they got away with it. They are being evicted not just for non-payment, but for fraud. So, what is the end game? What happens when 300,000 people receive this letter and cannot pay? We enter the phase of strategic default. This is what happened in the US in 2008 and in Alberta in the 1980s. It is called jingle mail. You put your keys in an envelope and mail them to the bank. You stop paying. You live in the house for free until the sheriff comes to kick you out, which can take a year or two due to the backlog in the courts. You save your cash. You ruin your credit score for 7 years, but you free yourself from the crushing debt. For many Canadians, this is unthinkable. We are a rule-following people. We pay our debts. We value our credit scores. But math is a cruel teacher. When you are looking at 20 years of slavery to pay off a debt on a house that is worth half of what you owe, morality starts to fade. Survival instincts kick in. People start to treat the mortgage like a business decision. Is it a good business decision to pay $1 million for a $700,000 asset? The answer is no. So they walk. When jingle mail starts, the inventory floods the market. Banks are forced to list these foreclosed homes. Banks are terrible sellers. They don't care about market value. They care about liquidation value. They dump the house for whatever they can get to clear the books. This drives comparable sales down further, which puts more neighbors underwater, which leads to more margin calls. It is a death spiral, a feedback loop of destruction, and we are just at the top of the slide. The government knows this. This is why they are panicking. This is why they are trying to pressure banks to be lenient. This is why they are talking about mortgage charters. They are trying to suspend the rules of mathematics. But you cannot legislate the value of an asset. If a buyer is only willing to pay $700,000, the house is worth $700,000. No amount of government wishing will make it worth $1 million. The banks know this. They have duties to their shareholders and depositors. They cannot hold bad paper forever. Eventually, the dam breaks. And the appraisal shock is also killing the refinance market. Used to be, if you ran up your credit cards, you could just refinance your house and roll the debt into the mortgage. You used your house as an ATM. That ATM is out of order. You cannot refinance if you have no equity. So the people who are drowning in credit card debt, the people we discussed in our insolvency video, have no lifeline. They are hitting the wall. This leads to a consumer spending collapse. No more renovations, no more new cars, no more vacations. The economy grinds to a halt because the wealth effect of housing has turned into the poverty effect. There is a specific demographic that is most at risk, the mom and pop investor, the person who bought 3 condos using the equity from their primary residence. Boom, they are now getting margin calls on 4 properties at once. Their primary home has dropped in value, so the HELOC, home equity line of credit, is frozen. The investment condos are underwater and cash flow negative. The bank is calling all the loans. We are going to see a wave of bankruptcies among the landlord class that will rival the Great Depression. These people leveraged everything on the belief that real estate never goes down. They are about to learn that leverage cuts both ways. What should you do if you receive the letter? First, do not panic. Panic leads to bad decisions. Second, call a lawyer. Not the real estate lawyer who closed your deal, but an insolvency lawyer. Understand your rights. Understand the difference between an insured and uninsured mortgage. In some provinces like Alberta, most mortgages are non-recourse in certain situations, meaning the bank can take the house but cannot come after your other assets. In Ontario and BC, they are full recourse, meaning they can take your house, sell it, and then sue you for the remaining debt and garnish your wages for the rest of your life. You need to know where you stand. Third, look at your liquidity. Cash is your oxygen. If you have cash, you can negotiate. You might be able to make a lump sum payment to satisfy the bank. If you don't have cash, you need to look at liquidation. Sell the car. Sell the cottage. Sell whatever you can to save the primary residence, if it is worth saving. But do the math. Do not throw good money after bad. If you are $500,000 underwater, maybe the best decision is to walk away. It is a hard pill to swallow, but it might be the only medicine that saves your future. To the buyers sitting on the sidelines, this is why you wait. This is why you don't catch a falling knife. The distress is just starting to show up in the listings. The power of sale listings are the canary in the coal mine. When you see a house listed as is, where is, that is a bank sale. That is a margin call that ended in a foreclosure. Those listings are going to multiply. The shadow inventory of underwater homes is massive. It is an iceberg, and we are only seeing the tip. The era of easy money is over. The era of the ATM house is over. We are entering the era of the margin call. It is going to be painful. It is going to be ugly, but it is the necessary correction for a market that lost its mind. Real estate is shelter. It is not a risk-free casino. And the house always wins, and in this case, the house is the bank, not the homeowner. Subscribe to Canada Property Watch. We will guide you through this minefield. We will tell you the truth that the real estate boards are afraid to whisper. We are here to protect you from the debris of the collapsing bubble. Check your mail, read your statements, and know your loan-to-value ratio. Your financial survival depends on it.